In the 16th century, Icelandic rune scholars didn't just document the straightforward use of runes, they also catalogued ways to hide them. Today, we're opening Runologia, a manuscript that records a large number of systematic runic ciphers, including one that may reach back to the beginning of the Middle Ages. Hello, rune scholar, wherever and whenever you are. I'm the modern Erilar, and in my last episode, we looked at Viking Age and medieval runes made secret through code. Today, we move forward in time to the runic codes recorded by scholar Jón Ólafsson in his text Runologia. Runologia survives in a manuscript from 1752, now part of the Arnamagnæan Collection in Copenhagen. In it, Ólafsson has recorded runic knowledge from his research on Icelandic manuscripts, including several pages on cipher runes that start on the page he numbered 159. The first and largest group of ciphers in Runologia are all variations on one idea: coordinate encoding, where the Futhark has been divided into three parts using the familiar 3-2-1-8 order, and then on the next page what looks like a less common 1-2-3 variant. We can tell exactly which of the eights he means because he uses the convention of naming each division with the rune that begins it, fe, hogel, or tyr. In his tables of runic systems presented on pages 163 and 166, he presents many types of coordinate runes. What these systems share is not their shape, but their logic. Physical marks standing in for abstract coordinates. From here on, the shapes will change, but the logic won't. What matters is how physical marks stand in for abstract coordinates. For example, he presents many similar types of twig runes, such as kvistrunar, where the 8 value appears on the left and the position of the rune within the 8 is on the right. In the sets of Einwerfingar, 8 and rune values are marked on the same side, with the rune value at the top and the 8 at the bottom. Apparently, the values in Inscriptions are also distributed vertically, with feet for the 8 value and rings on the staff for the rune value. So how did he collect so many types of runic ciphers? On pages 165 and 167, Ólafsson attempts to record faithfully the existing version of an otherwise lost runic treatise from around or shortly before 1550 called Membrana, as well as 2 other short paper manuscripts also likely now lost. These 3 manuscripts show us that in the 16th century, something changes with runic usage. Rune scholars start to experiment with new and different divisions of the Futhark that divide the Futhark differently to our familiar 3-8s. The Halves system divides the Futhark in 2 at the point between neither and ease, counting outward from that break, so that 8 neither runes, for example, encode the fe rune from the beginning of the Futhark. The brimrunar divide the Futhark into 3 groups, but the ar rune is by itself, represented by a single vertical line, whereas the other runes are either represented by a sequentially increasing number of sol runes, or they are encoded by an increasing number of vertical strokes joined by a single horizontal line, again outward, counting from the orienting point. Also shown are similar divisions of the Futhark that go into fourths and eighths. Crucially, we have no inscriptions that place these systems earlier than the 16th century, which tells us that we may be looking at scholarly experiments rather than inherited usage. We do have an early modern inscription where the runes seem to be divided into a 4-part system. Thorgunnur Snædal recorded an inscription using a 4-part coordinate system that appears on a 17th century carved knitting needle box, now part of the collections at the National Museum of Iceland. If we apply a 4-part Twig rune system from Runologia, this gives us what are probably the initials of the owner. The closest we come to an inscription that dates prior to the Reformation is this rune stick from Bergen, which divides the Futhark into 5 parts by repeating each rune in sequence, once, twice, then 3 times before moving on. This mirrors the same logic that appears in the 4-part and 8-part ciphers for the Futhark, but as of early 2026, I'm not aware of an exact match for the manuscript versions in a surviving inscription of medieval or earlier date. Membrana also recorded a fascinating system called Jåtunvillur, and this system helps us crack multiple medieval encoded runic inscriptions. Everything we've seen so far in Runologia encodes runes using position, and this system is different. It's linguistic. Its name means giant delusion, suggesting a system for misleading the Jotnar of the sagas. Ólafsson recorded it multiple times on pages 166 and 170, but the versions differ, and it's not clear that he understood how it worked. And yet, this is one of the rare cases where an early modern manuscript helps us unlock genuinely medieval inscriptions. Jonas Nordby explained how Jåtunvillur works in his PhD thesis. The key is in the rune's name. In the greater version of this system, each rune is replaced by the final rune in its name. The lesser version goes one step further, a too-deep substitution, where the replacement rune is itself replaced again. Unlike most antiquarian material, this system doesn't just reflect contemporary theory, it appears to have been in use much earlier. As of 2018, Nordby had identified at least 9 earlier examples, all from Norway and Iceland. So let's look at a few. This rune stick from Stóruborg in Iceland shows the system in action. Here, almost the entire Futhark is written using Jåtunvillur. Fe is replaced by the final rune in its name, stong e's, or an e sound. Ur is represented by Ræð, and so on. So what we're looking at is nearly a complete rune row written entirely in this code. So now that you have the key, you can crack this code. Let's test this with our best Rosetta Stone, runestick B89, also from Bergen. Its A side looks like a teaching tool, as there seem to be 2 names written out twice, though both ends of the stick are broken off. Parts of the name Sigurdur are written out first in plain text and then in Jåtunvillur with the name La France or Lawrence. This runestick, B41, pushes Jåtunvillur further than any example we've seen so far. On the left side of the A face, we see Jåtunvillur, but with extra markings that complicate how we could read this inscription. The first Ræð rune has a diagonal cut. That may signal a bind rune of Aish and Ræð, possibly standing in for an Or rune that crosses the stave fully and indicates a short A sound rather than a longer A sound. The second Náðr rune has a dot. If that dot matters, it may indicate that the target rune is also dotted, which narrows the options to either dotted bjarkan for a P sound or a dotted kaun for a G sound. Working through those constraints, Nordby's reading is skeggi rides. Other solutions are also possible, especially if we treat some of these marks as extraneous rather than as encoding, but that ambiguity may be the point. For a system called Giant Deceiver, the goal may not have been secrecy through magic, but secrecy through effort. And that kind of effort is exactly what makes Jåtunvillur such a promising key for undeciphered text. What excites me most is that Jåtunvillur isn't just historically interesting, it's still productive. There are runic inscriptions that remain uninterpreted, and this system gives us a new approach to try, and that timing matters. Alessia Bauer and Wilhelm Heitzmann's Runica manuscripte Die Nordische Tradition is currently available for pre-order. My understanding is that their research includes a discussion of runologia. So with Nordby's thesis, these early modern sources can return to active scholarly circulation. That means that we're not just preserving runic knowledge, we as rune scholars are extending it. In this episode, we've seen how 16th century rune scholars preserved and systematized runic ciphers, and how one of those systems reaches much deeper into the medieval past. Next time, we'll look at a different type of runic cryptography, where knowing the name of the rune is also essential to solving the riddle. Until then, thank you for reading the runes with me, the modern Erilar.